Thank you. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Josh, and I'm very pleased to be here today on behalf of the Local Government Leadership Academy. And I'd like to take this chance to thank the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training for partnering with LGLA on this initiative. And I'd like to welcome everybody to this second session of this three-part webinar series. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the Local Government Leadership Academy. And the LGLA's mandate, for anybody who doesn't know, is to provide leadership opportunities and education development opportunities for BC's local government and First Nation elected leaders and senior administrators. By partnering with JTST, we hope that today you can get some specialized knowledge that will help you better understand and manage community economic development, which is an important aspect of governance. I'll give you a little bit of information about the LGLA. It was founded in, basically came out of an idea that the Union of BC Municipalities had in 2005, wanted to establish an educational organization, and approached the province and received a $1 million endowment for that purpose. That endowment was then boosted by contributions from founding partners, Union of BC Municipalities, Municipal Finance Authority, Municipal Insurance Association, BC Assessment, and Local Government Management Association, as well as by individual contributions from 73 local governments throughout BC. The LGLA puts on a number of educational events, most significant of which is probably the elected officials seminars, which are held every 4 years in the 5 regions of the province following local government elections. So stay tuned for those to start happening in 2019 again, after the 2018 elections. In between election years, we hold our annual leadership forum, which is a chance for local leaders from all over BC to gather together and learn from subject matter experts and from one another. Most years we also do a Chief Elected Officials Forum for mayors, chairs, and chiefs. And we're trying more and more to partner with other associations, educational institutions, and government to provide online learning opportunities such as this webinar series. And some of you may already be aware or have heard of our certificate program. You may even be certificate holders yourselves. The LGLA now offers Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3 certificates on local government leadership, and you'll find information about the program and all about the LGLA on our website at lgla.ca. And for those of you who may already be working towards a certificate, just remember that this webinar and others, this session and others in this webinar series counts towards your certification hour requirements. One other notable innovation from the LGLA just this past year, we instituted the Kathy Watson Memorial Award in honor of one of LGLA's original founding members and a dear colleague who passed away in 2015. Elected leaders are welcome to apply for funding to attend our annual leadership forum or an elected official seminar in their region. Again, you can get more information on that from our website. And just in closing, before I turn it back over to the speakers, I'm really pleased that today we're in the second session of this webinar series. Be moving away from the basics and looking more in depth at Strategic Planning and Performance Measurement Toolkits developed by the Economic Development Division. And just as it notes on the slide, the third session in this series will be upcoming and looks to be very interesting. It will be about how neighboring local governments and First Nations can partner on economic development to the benefit of all. If you haven't signed up for that last session, I would certainly encourage you to do so. I believe there's still room, and it would be a great opportunity to build on your knowledge and get some specific ideas for what can work in your communities. And with that, I'm pleased to turn it back over to Josh.
Great, thanks very much for that introduction, Nicola. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Mark, who's going to start the dive into the content today. Mark, you should have screen control.
All right, and hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. All right, so hello folks. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Strategic Planning Toolkit that we developed, and just to quickly run through the agenda. So for the next little bit, I'm going to give you a bit of a brief introduction, talk about why you should be doing strategic planning, then dive into the Strategic Planning Toolkit and go through a bit of a live demonstration, online demonstration of it. Then I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jerry, who will talk about why you should be thinking about performance measurement and talk about the Performance Measurement Toolkit that's linked into the to the Strategic Planning tool. Okay, so who we are. The Ministry of Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training. We're here to help create a strong economy in BC. I work for the Economic Development Division, and we work with communities, industry, economic development agencies, and other ministries to promote regional economic growth and diversification. Hopefully, you folks are familiar with the different regional managers scattered throughout the province, but you probably know certainly our Minister, Shirley Bond. Okay, so how do we do this? Basically, we have a variety of different things that we do. First off, we host a bunch of different webinars. We have a webinar series, obviously, you guys signed into one today. And we use these to highlight best practices and to educate participants in a variety of regional economic development activities. We also come out to your communities, either with regional managers or through consultants, to put on a variety of different workshops on just different economic development tools and things you can do. Regional managers like myself and Jerry provide on-the-ground support, and we're located throughout BC. So where are we located? As Josh mentioned, I'm up here in Terrace. Jerry's down the Kootenays in Invermere, and we have a variety of regional managers, like I say, scattered throughout the province, covering different areas from their sort of home offices. We also have quite a number of staff headquartered in Victoria that provide logistical support and create a bunch of these different tools. And of course, Josh is one of those folks. We also provide support through the web, through our online portal. We have a number of different tools and resources located there, as you can see. There's the Economic Development Trusts that provide funding support, Northern Development Initiative Trust, the Southern Interior Development Trust, Island Coastal Trust, and so on. And as well, there's data that's available for you online. There's something called the BC Economic Atlas, which is a very useful mapping tool that we provide. So through the web portal, and I'll be going to that in just a short little bit. This is what it looks like, and it provides you access to all these different tools through the internet. Also want to put in a plug for the BC Ideas Exchange. It's somewhere, again, you can go on the web, and it's a place to share ideas, to look and see what other communities are doing around lessons learned, best practices, and so on and so forth. So I would encourage you to go and check that out as well. So getting on to the meat of what we're here to talk about today, what is strategic planning? You all have a sense of what planning is, and here's a definition about strategic planning, which is basically a process in which a community looks at its current situation and compares that to where it would like to be within a certain period of time. And the keywords here are current situation and where you'd like to be. So obviously, where are you now, and what is the sort of desired future outcome that you'd like to be at? Okay, why would you undertake strategic planning? Number of different reasons. Certainly as local government officials, you want to demonstrate that you're doing something. I'm sure I can say, pretty good guess that all of you at some point in your political career have promised to create jobs in your community or to work on the local economy. And by doing strategic economic development planning, this is a way that you can demonstrate and show that you're actually doing something in this regard, and you have a plan in place, and you're trying to move forward. Number of the other reasons here in terms of allowing communities to be responsive to funding opportunities. So that's being ready when these opportunities exist. So often we find there's a funding opportunity that comes up, and by the time communities are aware of it, and there's certain deadlines for getting your application in, communities don't have the chance to touch base with all the other organizations within their communities, make sure they're all working on the same priority, get letters of support, get all those types of things in place. Whereas if you already have a plan in place saying this is what our priorities are going to be and this is what we're going to try and find funding for, when those opportunities arise, you've already got your plan able to demonstrate that it's there, you've got people backing it, and everyone knows that that's your priority. A second reason is to coordinate efforts and create connections and partnerships within your communities. So often we hear the term, let's all paddle in the same direction. In communities that are well functioning and have a good strategic plan, everybody knows where the community is moving towards within that plan and are all heading in that direction. Whereas if you don't have a strategic plan, people are always putting in lots of effort, but maybe they're working at cross purposes or just going in different directions. And again, that creates inefficiencies. Having a strategic plan helps you to market your community and attract investment. Certainly this is an important component for a number of communities looking to grow and try and encourage companies to come and set up shop in their communities. Strategic planning can get past the talking, and I know a number of you are saying, well, wait a minute, isn't planning just a bunch of talking and writing stuff down, and how does planning get you past the talking? But if you have a good strategic plan that leads right into concrete actions that have people responsible for these actions and a way of measuring that they're getting done, so you actually are able to, through your planning, get over that step and get moving and get past talking and get down to acting. And finally, having a strategic plan helps keep track of what you're doing and seeing if it's making a difference. So this is where Jerry's going to come in and talk about performance measurement and accountability. So we went out to the communities in the spring of 2016. We had an opportunity to partner, Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training partnered with the BC Economic Development Association and the Union of BC Municipalities to conduct a survey on how stakeholders from across the province view local economic development. And the response we got was then with regards to planning, and again, the categories here are 51% here. This is a large community, the category, which was a population of 50,000 or greater. In the center, we had the medium-sized communities that would be 5 to 50,000 in population. And on the right-hand side, we have the smaller communities, less than 5,000. So you can see here that in large communities, 51% have and actively use an economic development plan. In the medium-sized communities, that dropped to 40%, and in the smaller communities, that number dropped down to 23%. But of those who had a plan, 75% thought it was effective, 43% updated the plan annually, and 27% updated the plan every 2 to 4 years. And remember, I talked about a strategic plan as a plan that is current, your current situation, so it's very important to update it as things change. Now, on the flip side of this, even though this sounds encouraging, what this is telling us is that somewhere between 49 and 77% of communities either don't have a plan or don't use a plan that they've got. And this is the statistic that we're really trying to address by creating the Strategic Planning Toolkit. So we understand, working with communities and going out there, the other regional managers and myself, that there are a lot of barriers, certain common barriers that communities have to doing strategic planning. You know, it says here the perception of plans just sit on the shelf and gather dust. That's not just a perception, that really happens. You know, if you go into a number of communities, ask them if they have an active plan, they might say no, but you root around and find out, oh yeah, there's one sitting on the shelf in their council room. Or maybe they just kind of point to it and said, yeah, we did it, it's right over there. It's this colossal thing, but we never really look at it. One of the other barriers people think is that it might raise unrealistic expectations. Again, I'm not sure if that's a bad thing, but certainly you want to be realistic with the expectations you do create. People feel like one barrier is that it costs too much to implement, and certainly we've seen communities that have spent a tremendous amount of money hiring consultants and doing very extensive, creating very extensive economic development plans. So, you know, you can spend a whole gob of money, but you don't have to. Some communities say, well, you know, we've been there, we did that, and so we don't need to do any more. Or it never really helped us, and so that's something we want to get past. In other communities, they feel it's not the role of local government to work on. So I'm not sure who they think is going to work on this. Certainly the province does to some degree, but that is a perception in some communities. And in others, you know, there could be no interest in growth or change. So at this point, just to shake things up and get a sense of what you folks online here in the webinar feel, I'm going to ask Josh to do a quick poll to see what barriers might exist in your communities, just so we have a better sense of who we're talking to.
Sure thing. So on the front of your screen, everyone, you should see a set of options there. Just feel free to tick on the box that might describe the situation in your community. And once you've clicked through those, we can, I'll share the polls and we'll see where we're all sitting. This poll is anonymous. You don't have to worry about that. You won't be attributed to this, so feel free to share away. I've got about a quarter of you have responded now, about a third, getting close to a half. About 60% now. Let's see, got almost all of you in now, 77%. Might be a few folks there just asleep at the wheel. 80%, got one of you.
That don't have any barriers at all, Josh.
Yeah, that's right, thanks. That's a very valid point. Some communities might be doing awesome, and it looks like it's stuck at 80%, so we'll leave it there. I'm going to close the poll, and let's share these results. So it looks like about two-thirds, 64% say that the perception is the plan just sits on the shelf and gathers dust. We've got about a third, 32% saying that it might raise unrealistic expectations. 36 say that it costs too much to implement. 11% believe that it's not the role of local government to work on economic development, and about half, at 46%, have a number of other barriers that aren't listed. So we're obviously missing some components there. So maybe in the question and answer pane, feel free to type in and share what some of those other barriers are that we listed. I won't identify you by name. I can see on my end what that problem is, but I won't say it if I share it with the group. So feel free to type in that Q&A pane what the other barriers will be, and I'll let Mark go to the next slide, and we'll come back to it once I've got a few more answers in the queue. So I'm going to hide the poll now, and back to you, Mark.
Great, thanks, Josh. So that really confirms what we've been finding out there. That you know, one of the main things is people think that your plan just sits on the shelf and gathers dust, and also that a number of people think it costs too much to implement. So if we can do nothing else than address those 2 points, I think we've really done something here today. So why is it? Why do things sit on the shelf and gather dust? Maybe because they've been put on the shelf in the first place rather than sitting on people's desks and been front and center. Possibly because they're too long and cumbersome. People see a plan that's 300 pages long and it's got 100, 120 top priorities. How do you start something like that? So we're going to try through the next half hour or so to get you past these barriers and show that you can have a plan that will fit on your desk. It might not be 200 pages long. It might only be 8 to 12 pages long, and have a reasonable amount of action points that you can get on and start doing right away. The other thing that we've found and we've seen out there is that you have communities that have a plan with no action, or communities that have a lot of action but no plan. And these graphics are really awesome. I can't take credit for them, but they were provided. But this is great. You've got someone over here on the left that says, "Hey, I've got a plan," but no one's listening or actioning it. And you've got a bunch of people out here that are busy doing something, but it could be that they're dancing around in circles, not moving forward. And so, why do we have communities that have a plan with no action? In some cases, there's a perception that this is someone else's plan. Maybe it was done under a previous council, and current council doesn't really want to touch it. They want to do their own thing. Maybe, like I said before, it's quite a large plan, and it's got a number of things in it. But it was created by a consultant or somebody from outside your community, and you don't really know where to start in terms of actioning the plan or who's really accountable for doing what. Or like I said before, maybe there's just too many top priorities, and when you've got 50 or 60 top priorities, you don't really have any priority. In terms of an action with no plan, again, you might have lots of people volunteering and doing all kinds of good stuff, but there would be no coordination of effort. A lot of times we see a situation where the communities are always scrambling as opportunities arise, or very reactionary. So again, I'm going to kick it over to Josh to do a second quick poll here to see if this situation describes your community. So again, Josh, take it away.
Yeah, sounds good, Mark. And perhaps just to set a bit of context before we jump into this one, or I'll let you decide. Do you want to talk about the other barriers to entry for strategic planning now, or after we wrap up this poll?
After we wrap up the poll.
Okay, sounds good. So this next poll you should have in front of your screen now. So we've got a few options there. Feel free to click through just one choice on this one compared to the last poll. Looks like we've got about a quarter of you responded in now. There's about 40%. I've got one person who's saying that one option that's missing is just starting the process. So thanks for that comment. We'll add that in for the next poll there. We've got about 66% who have chimed in. So I'll give you another 20 seconds or so. Go ahead, Mark.
Maybe they could click. They don't have a plan, but they want a plan.
Yeah, that's a good option.
Something that might fit for them.
All right, and with about 70% reporting in there, I'm going to close the poll there. So if we take a look at the results, we've got about 20% have and actively use an economic development strategic plan. 24% have a plan but don't use it. About half, at 48%, don't have a plan but want one. That's certainly good to hear. And 8% no time to plan, just muddle along. And hopefully at the end of this webinar we can change your tune on that one and show how we can save you some time with this toolkit. So I'll hide the poll there.
So okay, and like I said, very encouraged that pretty much half of you don't have a plan but want to do one. So that means that we're preaching to the converted here, and hopefully we'll give you the tools that you need to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, do you want me to jump into the barriers now from that last poll, just to read some of those out, just to set some context?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we've got some of them here. We've got staff turnover, unable to engage necessary community participation, perception that they cost too much to develop, but as this person mentioned, they don't need to, and I'm glad you agree. That's certainly what we think. Local government not wanting to work with the community. A barrier is also cost, having the staff. Poor connection between local government and the Economic Development Committee. And as mentioned before, someone who is just starting out but hasn't yet started a plan. So I hope that provides a bit more context for the presentation, Mark.
Yes, absolutely it does, because I think that as we go through this, you'll see that we've really tried to address all those different issues. And certainly a staff turnover can be a problem, but if you have a plan in place, it actually helps you with transitioning to new staff. Yep. By giving staff a sense of what was done, what the priorities were, and this is a plan they can just pick up and run with rather than having to start afresh. So actually that can do this in terms of addressing poor connectivity between local government and the ECDEV office, or maybe it's the chamber, or maybe it's just the broader community, through some of the steps within the planning process. You can bring all these different groups into the planning process and get buy-in and start getting people working together. So I think we can address pretty much all those barriers as we move forward here.
Excellent. So we'll leave it to you to take it away.
All right. So with regards to the toolkit, we developed this over the last 9 months. We developed it with a working group with a handful of regional managers throughout the province, as well as a number of economic development officers representing pretty much somewhere between 20 or 30 communities throughout BC, all providing input and good ideas and best practices into this. Okay, so basically the purpose that we set out with was to enable communities to create a concise, measurable, and actionable economic development plan. And again, the keywords here being concise, something that they could actually measure and see that they were doing something, and that it was actionable. We wanted to help communities that either had never developed or had an outdated strategic plan. They had a lengthy plan, but it sat on the shelf, and they just needed to boil it down to a more workable plan. A lot of the pieces were probably there. Maybe again, like we talked about, they have an active plan, but they need to implement some sort of monitoring or measurement support for that plan, so they know if it's actually doing what it was intended to do, or as well to provide communities with something that perhaps they weren't able to go through the full broad planning process, but would benefit about learning from some of the individual components of the plan, like the stakeholder engagement component, to get people working together. A term that we really wanted to push is something we're calling a surge momentum, which is just getting over that initial inertia from planning or having a plan to actually doing something, and to get to some quick wins, some things that if you've got an identified action with someone, identify it as the person responsible for doing that action or the group responsible for it, and a deadline to report back, it's got a greater chance of getting done than just sort of sitting there as, well, somebody should do this, and what happens is nobody ends up doing it. So we wanted to identify how communities could do this and break up the planning process into manageable steps for communities. Okay, so what does the toolkit provide? It provides, empowerment of local leaders. So providing the kind of the how-to to do planning. We wanted to have an achievable process, regardless of your stage in economic development. Be able to break down the strategic planning process into manageable pieces. I'm sure you've all heard the quote, how do you eat an elephant? So big, right? Well, you eat it one piece at a time. So we've really broken down the strategic planning process into manageable, bite-sized pieces that you can tackle and work your way through. The toolkit's self-guided and customizable. What we did was we created an initial self-assessment that would tailor the process to your community's needs. So as we tour around the province, we realize that every community is different. It's not just something people say, it is the truth. Every community is different. Every community may be at a different stage in the planning process or have certain pieces of it done and others not done. So the challenge that we faced was creating a toolkit that anyone could use. And so what we spent a lot of time and energy on was an initial self-assessment phase where communities could really kind of go through and sort of say, this is where my community's at, and really, these are the resources that I have, and really be able to tailor the strategic planning process to their community. The toolkit provides and delivers, once you go through it, a manageable 8 to 12 page plan, and the toolkit's web-based and downloadable. We also thought about how communities could use the toolkit to do the strategic planning process, and we wanted to make it certainly a process that the community could do by itself, so the community could lead the process with existing staff. If they have an active officer, or if they're smaller, perhaps they have, their CAO would be the one that would have to lead the process. But we certainly made it so that could happen. In the second situation, we also envisioned that regional managers like myself or Jerry could come out to your community and assist in facilitating the process. We wouldn't do the whole plan for you, but we would be able to kind of facilitate and help the communities get on the right track by maybe doing some, a bit of a workshop or help with some of the moderate some of the sessions that would be involved, and also be able to provide advice and be there to make recommendations to your community. Or finally, we thought that the communities could hire a consultant to help facilitate the process, and we were looking at for example, the Rural Dividend Fund has a $10,000 planning tranche that people could apply for, and that should be enough to get a consultant to help you sort of facilitate and walk through the process. We're not talking about spending, $80,000, $90,000 on doing this, but felt that if you were able to apply for rural dividend funds in that envelope, that should be enough for a consultant to help walk through the process, if you want to approach it that way. So how the toolkit is structured is really, again, in somewhat of a linear fashion. There's a whole portion here before you get going on the plan, which talks about getting support, checking for readiness. And this is really where we wanted you to look at, your community and say, what are some of the barriers that exist to maybe make this happen? And let's kind of break down these barriers at first. Before you get going, you want to certainly look at, putting together a project team to do this. Now, your project team may be as simple as your CAO and one of your counselors that has ACTEV as their, one of their portfolios, or it could be as complicated as, a representative from a number of different stakeholders, your ACTEV officer, your council, your chamber, business leaders, not-for-profits. It could be a much broader team. Again, this will be specific to your community. And then once you've got that, you would go through this self-assessment tool, which is one of the first steps, and from that you'll be able to assess, where is your community at? Maybe you've already got a community vision. Maybe you've already been, you've done like a SWOT analysis on your community. You've done it a million times. You don't need to redo that. So this is where, by going through the self-assessment tool at the start, it will then plug you into the various parts of the planning process, and you'll be able to pick out which parts of the tools here, we've highlighted them in purple perhaps as an example, that you might use, and the ones in gray you don't need to use because you've already done that, or it's not applicable to your situation, you don't want to go into that great depth of planning. But in the end, what you do process will end up as an output, and that will be what will populate your plan that would fit into your plan template that we've provided, and then you'll finish and emerge from the process with a strategic plan. So with that said, I'd like to just dive into a bit of a live demo of the toolkit. I won't take very long because I know Jerry's got a bit to say. We want to leave room for questions, but I'll go into a live demo at this point. Okay, so this is the landing page for the toolkit, and before we start going into it, I want to show you how to get to it if you're just getting onto the internet. So if you were to Google Government of BC, websites or whatever, typically one of them will, anyone you come up to will have this sort of sunrise logo and Government of BC, and if you just clicked on that, it will take you to the Government of BC homepage. Okay, and so this is the main landing page for gov.bc.ca, and if you look down under how may we help you and look through the various categories here, if you scroll down, you'll find one that's titled Employment, Business, and Economic Development. And if you go through these different categories, you'll find here Economic Development. So if you just click on that link, it will take you to the Economic Development portal, which I mentioned earlier on in my talk. And this is where you'll find things like the BC Ideas Exchange that I mentioned. We've got grant funding and grant search tool, a variety of other resources. But if you go under Developing Your Community and click on Explore Within, you'll see there's a number of things here, and in the middle of the list is the Strategic Planning Toolkit. So if you click on that link, that leads you to the Strategic Planning Toolkit page. So again, Toolkit will help communities do all these things. How the Toolkit works, I mentioned it's set up in a bit of a linear fashion. So there's getting started, and that's where the self-assessment tool sits. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? And are we getting there? So if you expand all these categories, you'll see that under Getting Started, it talks about the self-assessment tool, setting the stage, keys to success, and so on and so forth. There's also links here to documents that you can use in terms of reference for your project team, or a template for your work plan, which are very important. If you look under the Where Are We Now, there's links to do your info and asset inventory, your stakeholder and partner identification, so on and so forth. So this is breaking down the process. We broke it down into getting started, then 4 very simple questions, and then under each question you've got all the different steps to get there. So if you were to say click on setting the stage, this is what will pop up. And all our sections have a very similar feel in that they give a description of what this component is, the rationale for the component, the logistics in terms of the duration, the format, who would be the key players, the resources required, what the output is going to be, and what the process would be. And then, again, some other things on the second page, perhaps some tips, and so on and so forth. If you go to the self-assessment tool, which is, again, where you want to start, but once you've got the project team, under the self-assessment tool, this is what it looks like. Again, this is a form where you would just click on and answer these questions, and then print it off, and you would have it as saying, okay, these are the components we want to go through. What I want to draw your attention to is that, again, if you have limited capacity, we've put a star or an asterisk at the components that should be the highest priority. So if you want to do, sort of not the full mill deal, but you only have the capacity to do a sort of a more simplified strategic planning process, that's great. We want to encourage you to do that, and we've sort of highlighted the main components that you should be. So if you look on this, on the column, the blue column on the left-hand side, under components, you'll see that basic statistics and information is one of the asterisk or starred components that we want you to do. The description is to gather key community information and stats. So this is where you're really sort of laying out what your current situation is. For each component, we've estimated the time commitment that it would take to do. So you can see here that again, even if you're doing every component of the planning process, it might be an hour, hour and a half an hour, that sort of thing. It's certainly doable for any community. It's just a matter of setting aside the time to do it. So again, as you go through the self-assessment process, you can say, do I already have this? Do we already have all this basic statistics and information? Well, maybe you do. Okay, so you would click yes. Is there an interest in completing? Well, no, we've already got it, but I'll include it in the work plan because I've already got this information. I want to feed it into the work plan. The second key thing that we have here starred would be the strategic assessment or some sort of SWOT or similar analysis, which would pinpoint the strengths, challenges, and opportunities your community has. Scrolling down onto the second page of the assessment, we want you to identify strategic areas that you want to work on. We want you to prioritize and develop action items within these strategic areas, and then produce your strategic plan document. So those are the, and then create an implementation work plan. So those are really the key components that are the minimum, but certainly you can do a bunch of other steps if you want to go through a more thorough process. Just in terms of, again, just showing maybe one or two other areas on here. In terms of keys to success tool, again, this is as you're just starting out. You may do this with your project lead or one or two additional players. And again, you want to review this checklist on the following page. So if you look at the following page, again, this is where, again, we list out what might be some of the common barriers to moving forward with the plan. For example, our council and other community leaders and decision makers on board. Well, if they're not, or maybe, this is something you want to address up front before you start down that planning process, because it could really derail it as you move down the line. So again, in terms of, for example, under the where are we now, again, your information and asset inventory, if you click on the link, again, it takes you to this similar kind of page that lays out the steps, the description, the rationale, how to do it. And we've got here, for example, what are some of the categories you might have? So physical infrastructure, this is what you might have. Things like transportation, utilities, community facilities, the housing, natural assets, economic drivers, all these kinds of things. So So again, we've tried to really think through this whole process for you and give you lots of hints, lots of tables that you could reference, so on and so forth. I could continue to go through this for hours, but what I will do is suggest that you know, if you learn nothing else from this webinar, you know where it is on our website, how to get there, and that I encourage yourself and your staff to go on here and explore. So at this point, I'll kick it over to Jerry, and she can lead you through the why doing performance measurements and that component is an important step of this.
Great, thanks very much, Mark. Jerry, you should have screen control now, and feel free to turn on your webcam whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you.
And there it is. Take it away.
Terrific. Thanks very much. And thanks very much to Mark. So performance measurement, we really feel that this is an integral part of planning and implementing your economic strategic plan. And so much so that the Economic Development Division has developed a dedicated toolkit for creating a performance measurement system for whatever local economic development project or program you might be undertaking. And so today I'm going to provide you a quick overview of why performance measurement is important, and then show you a few of the features of the Performance Measurement Toolkit. Sorry, just have this second here. All right, thanks. So what is performance measurement all about? Ultimately, it's a system. It's a system for monitoring how on track you are in achieving your goals, as well as a system for demonstrating and communicating the value of your economic development efforts, both internally in your own staff and organization, as well as externally to the stakeholders in your community. Why should we do performance measurement? Basically, it is a way of assessing the effectiveness of the activities, the programs, or the projects that you're undertaking. And then this allows you to evaluate those programs or activities in an informed way and really focus your time and resources on high-value activities. This can then feed into that planning process that Mark just talked about, where you can go about it in an informed way. What's working and what isn't, and what would you change? By having performance indicators, it really informs the process. One of the most important reasons for performance measurement is about communications. It's great for accurately communicating your progress internally and externally, and it can demonstrate your success to stakeholders and really build accountability between your community and the projects and activities that you're taking on for your economic development program. We've found that commonly performance measurement is left out of a project or program. And some of the common barriers we've identified are related to no time, the idea that planning and tracking and reporting seems really daunting. Also the idea that the work that you're doing isn't something that you can measure. Shifting roles or mandates might make measuring some of the outcomes that you're after seem really challenging. Often communities are reluctant to measure their work. Some elected officials, boards, executives, may be reluctant to measure and report progress. And also there may not be an incentive to do performance measurement in the first place. If an organization has never done performance measurement before, there may not be a demand to do this kind of thing or any sort of best practice established. How do we break through some of these barriers? First off, we really recommend that performance measurement becomes part of your organizational culture, so that it becomes common practice to set goals for a project or program, to track them with a performance measurement system. And when doing that, it's really important to recognize that performance measurement systems are meant to change over time. So the idea that you need to continue to monitor and then adjust as necessary depending on what you're doing and what kind of activities and outcomes you're after. Engagement of both your stakeholders as well as leadership in the community in your process is important to have buy-in that this is something that you want to spend time on, as well as to create expectations about reporting frequency and how you're going to communicate some of the results. And finally, the idea that you communicate with everybody on your team about why performance measurement is important. I hope that I've communicated some good reasons for why to do this, and it's important for you to then make your team members at all levels also understand why. So the Economic Development Performance Measurement Toolkit provides a step-by-step process that can be tailored to your specific needs. So much like the Strategic Planning Toolkit that Mark just went through, it's very scalable based on your program or capacity. So we would encourage you to use this at a project level or at an organizational level. And one of the things I really like about the toolkit is that it provides a concrete link between the activities that your organization is doing on the ground to the desired outcomes of your overall program and mandate, and gives you tools to measure those things. The pieces of the toolkit include a user guide. The core piece of the toolkit is an Excel workbook that consists of a series of exercises that, once you've completed them, leads you to selecting performance indicators. And then we've provided also a library of over 200 indicators across several economic development topics. So those are there to help you figure out what things you want to measure and to give you ideas. We've included templates in the toolkit, so these are things for a work plan or implementation plan, as well as annual reports and dashboards, which is something I'll talk about later in my presentation. And finally, our toolkit includes an image library that contains infographic style images available for your download and use. The toolkit's broken into 5 steps, very much a linear process. We start with taking a look at what's going on right now about you. We then visualize the path of where you are in terms of what outcomes you're seeking with your program. We help you choose the indicators, then create an implementation plan for making this all happen, and finally provide some tools to communicate your results. So just briefly, I'll go through these steps. The first step in performance measurement is to determine what economic development work is currently planned and underway, as well as what direction you're headed. A clear understanding of your current state will position you to use your performance measurement in an effective way. This image here is a screenshot of one of the pages on our downloadable workbook. And in this section, you'd capture what your program's ultimate goal is, what resources are available for your program, the activities that you're currently doing, and anything that you're currently tracking or have been asked to track. And so you can see in the very top box that it's asking for your ultimate outcome. And so an example of something you might say for an economic development program could be a diverse and resilient local economy. So that would be something that you could use as your ultimate outcome in that top box. The second step in the toolkit is to visualize the entirety of your program from where you are now to where you want to go. And the tool that we use to do this is called a logic model. And it's a really clear and easy way that provides a roadmap to what your program wants to measure. So this image here just shows what a logic model is all about. And in our toolkit, as you work through the workbook, it will fill in this model and helps you then visualize what you have available to you, what you want to do, and where you want to end up. So the idea with creating a logic model is that it links your program's activities to its desired outcomes. And this really gives the rationale for what you choose to measure along the way. One thing we really emphasize is the difference between measuring outputs and outcomes. So outputs relate to what we do. They're measuring your activities. So examples might be the number of workshops you put on, a number of blog posts you create, number of contacts made at a trade show. The outcomes, on the other hand, relate to why you're doing it or what difference or impact do you make. And so an example might be, is your economy more diverse in part because of your efforts? So it's trying to measure what change you've made in your work. And our message is it's good to measure both outputs and outcomes, but it's important to understand the difference because just because you can report that you held 10 workshops on business development, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've made a difference in improving those skills among your business community, for example. Our next step is about guiding you through choosing the performance indicators for tracking the progress of your program or project. And so performance indicators are used to track the outputs and the outcomes of your activities and to assess what kind of change has occurred. These can take all kinds of forms. So it might be quantitative indicators that are, like numerical values, facts. It may be qualitative indicators that are the opinions or perceptions of your stakeholders. And again, the idea that you can measure both outcomes as well as outputs when you select your performance indicators. One of the great features of the Performance Measurement Toolkit is our library of over 200 indicators that are organized by several economic development subject areas. So on this screenshot you can see we have indicators for general businesses, business attraction, as well as business retention, and we have several other themes besides that. Once you've set up the logic model through using the workbook and you really understand what your outputs and outcomes are in your program, you can then go through and match indicators to measure each of these things. And we also provide tools to help you figure out which are going to be the most effective for your program. So what are things you actually have control over, what's easy to collect, and how important is it to your stakeholders. The fourth step moves you from visualizing into action by outlining how you will manage your performance measurement efforts. And one thing that we've included in the toolkit is a template for an implementation plan that focuses on who, why, when, and where. What are the details in your program to keep your stakeholders informed. And make sure everyone knows who's responsible for what, who's taking the lead on everything, and when are things happening. So this graphic just emphasizes that we see performance measurement really as a cycle, because your program or your project might change over time, especially if you're continually revisiting a strategic planning process every year or two. Then you can continue to monitor and adjust your implementation plan for performance measurement according to what activities you're doing and what some of your goals are. So the final step in our Performance Measurement Toolkit outlines how to communicate the progress and success of your program. And the approach that we recommend for this is to use an indicator dashboard. A dashboard is a really simple visual presentation of your performance measurement indicators. And it uses simple visual symbols like infographics to represent the different indicators you've chosen for your program. And one of the things I really like about using a dashboard is you can use the materials that come out of it in all kinds of ways, whether it's in a quarterly or annual report, a presentation. You can use them on web posts or social media posts, newsletters, or whatever other requests you might get in terms of how you're doing and representing what your successes have been over the year. The Performance Measurement Toolkit makes your communications easy by providing templates. So we've included a template for an annual report. as well as for a more kind of one-pager type dashboard style report. And then we've also provided an image library where you can find icons and symbols to represent your indicators. The intention here is to save you the cost of a graphic designer and the time searching for the right image, and to make this an easy and quick process for you. So that's a quick take on the Performance Measurement Toolkit. Thanks very much for listening, and would welcome any questions.
Thanks very much, Sherry, and to Mark as well for your presentations today. We have hit the end of our presentations, and we're now in that Q&A stage. So folks, if you have questions on either the Strategic Planning Toolkit or the Performance Measurement Toolkit, or even just anything else the province is working on in these areas, feel free to either push that little raise a hand button and we can have ourselves a bit of a chat, or feel free to type in your question using the Q&A pane at the bottom of your dashboard. Wanted to point out a couple of other things just as we're waiting for some questions to come in. For the Strategic Planning Toolkit or the Performance Measurement Toolkit, or for that matter just about anything else, if you go to the government's homepage, right up at the top there's a nice big search bar just like on Google. And if you type in what you're looking for into that search bar, I can pretty well guarantee you're going to find what you're looking for if it exists on the website. We've done a ton of work over the past couple of years to really enhance the search capability of the government website to make it as easy as possible for you to find the things you're looking for. So if you can't remember exactly how to navigate and which menus to go through to get to it, don't worry about it. Just type it into the search bar and it will direct you to where you need to go. So don't worry about that one. Got a comment here from Shannon. No questions, but fantastic resources. Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks for the feedback, Shannon. You know, we would love to receive even more feedback, you know, and this goes for everyone on the webinar, as you use these tools, please do feel free to send us feedback. If something isn't working, if something feels weird, or if you feel there's something missing, economicdevelopment@gov.bc.ca, that's our general inbox for everyone here in the division, and we'll make sure it gets to the right place so that we can improve these tools to make it useful for you. If it's not working for you, it's not working for us either. So we can't know that unless you tell us. So please do send us feedback. We appreciate it. Yeah, and thanks, Shannon also says she'll try to use the tools in the upcoming project and keep us appraised. So thank you, Shannon. Really do appreciate that feedback. Jerry and Mark don't have any other questions in the queue quite yet, so wondering if there's any frequently asked questions that folks come across with either toolkit that you've experienced with your work on the ground. Any other little tidbits that you think would be useful for communities to know?
Well, I'd just say at this point, you know, just a bit of a plug that if communities, you know, people on the call or on the webinar are sitting here and again, they want to have a little bit more information, just to get a hold of any of the regional managers, whoever is responsible for their area, see if they'll come out. They could do a, you know, a bit of a live meeting walkthrough as well, just to get people going and started on it. When we did develop the toolkit, you know, we really tried to tailor it to every different community. So I can't emphasize enough the fact that the getting started component is really important, because that's where you'll get over some of the barriers that will, you know, cause your process to fail. Identify them up front, get people on board, get that buy-in. You know, no one can do this for you. The resources that you have reside within your community. The people that are really knowledgeable about your community, that are the community experts, are the people that live there. And they're the ones that are going to really be the champions for you here. You know, as we have an aging population, you know, you've got more baby boomers aging. You know, try and capitalize on these folks that are retired but are very knowledgeable and have nothing to do. You know, we've you know, they've been sort of coined as the gray dragons. You know, get them on board, get them working on this. That's a way to sort of extend your capacity to do this kind of work. So that's just something that we ran into when we developed this.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I just a comment here, Mary. It looks like I can see your hands up, and I assume you want to have a chat with us. I just need you to enter your 2-digit PIN so that I can unmute you. It's one more number, and it should be up on your screen there. I've sent it to you a couple of times. If you can't figure that out, no worries. Just feel free to type in your question, and we can get to it that way. Jared, did you have anything else from the performance measurement standpoint tool? Anything that stuck out to you?
Well, one thing actually I just wanted to follow up on Mark's comments that he just made about resources in the community. One tip that I've also heard that can be really great is as you're setting up the resources to undertake your strategic planning process, if you can identify even a small amount of funding as kind of like the quick wins or quick action fund to follow up your process with a couple of the early quick projects and to have some resources immediately available for that can be a really great way to carry through on the momentum that your planning project has usually creates. And it's another way of I think also demonstrating back to your community that it's not just a plan, that the plan translates to action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm not seeing too many other questions come in. I'm going to assume that Mary is furiously typing her question in, so to buy her a little bit of time, I'll just give a promo for our next webinar, which is coming up same time, same place next week, so Thursday at 1:30, and it's all about bridging those relationships with your neighboring Aboriginal communities and collaborating on economic development projects. It's put on by Brent Mainprize and Arthur Mercer, both of whom are executives, or sorry, Brent is a professor at UVic and Arthur is an executive in residence, both very, very knowledgeable gentlemen. I've had the privilege of attending a couple of their workshops and they've adapted it to a 1-hour webinar session for us, and it proves to be really, really useful. So you'll have information on how to connect to that webinar in your inbox, both on the promo for this webinar, and you would have received a separate one following it. So we do have a few seats left and really encourage you to sign up for that one as well. It looks like I've got that question from Mary. Just give me a sec here. Okay, so Mary's comment is really good information. However, in regards to Economic Development Toolkit, this has to be something that needs to be looked at on a regular basis. So I don't know how we can find the time with limited staff. How can it be done only once? So that's the question. So maybe a bit of a clarification there, Mark.
Well, I think once you've done it once, you'll find that updating it shouldn't be that onerous, right? And the thing is, we've tried to make it as simple as possible for communities to use if they just want to do a very cursory, kind of strategic plan. And one of the key is it's got to be current. So if things change in your community, then your plan is no good, right? So you can't just do it once. It has to become part of your everyday doing business. And it just, I can't emphasize enough that it does help to do some amount of planning. If you're just gonna muddle along, you're gonna miss the boat on certain funding opportunities. You're not going to have people all working together. If you find that people are working together and you've got a plan, you might engage more people and gather more resources and more capacity within your community. So I really encourage you to try and do it. Just go through and do the minimum amount of things that we did lay out there for you. And then, again, if you've already done your community asset inventory, it might not take you much to do it again to update that, right? So those kinds of things, if you've already thought about a number of different strategic areas to look at, it may just be going back to council or whoever your decision makers are to sort of ratify or tweak what maybe your priorities are, right? So it'll take more energy to go through the first time, obviously, but then after that, it would be a lot more easier to update.
Mm-hmm. And I think you hit an important part there, Mark, which is, you know, when you engage with the toolkit, you don't have to do everything all in one go. You can start with just the bare basics, which just helps you establish where you are. You know, economic development's a long journey, and there's a lot of different paths you can take, but it's tough to know what path to take if you don't know where you are in the first place. And so putting together, you know, something on, you know, with your strategic plan and with integrating even just one or two things to measure with the Performance Measurement Toolkit gives you a much better idea of where you are, and then even with your limited capacity, where you can go next.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and maybe, like, having done the toolkit once, you know, you're revisiting to the strategic plan may just simply be going to that one section that's the reprioritization of it, and it may only take an hour, you know, and then you're good for another year, you know.
Yep, and just want to emphasize again that both toolkits and any resources that you find on our website, gov.bc.ca/economic development, they're all completely free. There's no cost whatsoever. It's really just your own time and resources. So yeah, there's no cost to those. We've got a comment here from Susan. Thank you. Looking forward to working with the toolkit and our stakeholders to create our plan. The toolkit will save our resource challenge organization time and money. Thanks for the comment, Susan. That is exactly what we're hoping for. You know, no one knows your communities better than you do. And so what we're trying to do is just give you the tools to make your own economic development decisions as well informed and as efficiently as possible. We know you've got precious time and resources, so anything that we can do to help along the way, that's what we're here to do. And you've got two fantastic resources sitting in front of you, both Mark and Jerry, or whoever your regional manager may be. Do get in touch with them. They are certainly a valuable resource to put you in touch with all of the supports that the province can offer. So with that, not seeing any more questions come in, and we are getting near the end of our time today. So I want to say thank you very much to our panelists, Jerry, Mark, and also to Nicola. Thank you for popping up there, Nicola. It was great to have you introduce the session today, and it's been a pleasure to partner with the LGLA on this webinar series, and specifically reaching out to our local leaders across the province. So thank you again to our panelists, and a big thank you to all of our attendees that stuck with us through to the end of the Q&A session today. It was great to have you. And again, check out our website, gov.bc.ca/economic development, and almost the exact same if you want to send us an email for feedback or if you have a question, it's economicdevelopment@gov.bc.ca. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.